We are here today in Tampa, Florida, at the home of one of our former presidents of the Florida Association of School Psychologists, Mr. Brad Underhill. It's great to see you, Brad. How are you?
Thank you. It's great to be seen.
So Brad is our 52nd president of FASP. And do you want to tell us when your tenure was, Brad?
My presidency was November 2008 to November 2009.
Okay, so that's been a while. What have you done since then?
I've served as a school psychologist, and then I also served as a mentor and a evaluator for school psychologists.
Okay, and you're now currently employed by whom?
Hillsborough County Schools, and I work in a mainstream setting, an elementary school and a high school.
Okay, very nice. Now, today is June 18th, 2018, and so you are on vacation, right?
Yes.
Well, a beautiful home to have a vacation. I would like to switch gears and ask you a couple of questions about your presidency. So could you share what some of the main events or accomplishments that took place under your leadership as FASP president?
Well, more events than accomplishments. I got caught up in several events, and in contrast to the beautiful, bright, sunshiny day, it was a bit of a dark shadow on the presidency. There were several major events that occurred during my presidency. One was, if you remember, September 2008, the crash of the stock market. And I took office 2 months later and had to deal with the ramifications of that, mostly affecting our budget. And the fact that as my first year as president-elect, I was helping to find the location for our conferences for a couple years down the road. But the board had decided to take a contract for 3 years, which included a room block as well as food and beverage minimums. And with the crash of the stock market and the financial concerns with housing, etc., we lost a lot of attendees at the conference, and our organization over the next 3 years suffered financially. Luckily, we had great reserves, but they got tapped into, so we had to negotiate with the hotel to try to minimize our losses on these food and beverage and unmet occupancy at the hotel. Another one was, it was in the middle of the response to intervention and the SLD rule from the Florida State Department of Education, and our board was deeply divided on this. There were people that were aware that RTI was going to happen. This was a national initiative. It was not something that Florida was dreaming up. And there were those that felt that it was down the road, it would impact greatly their ability to do assessments with children, and that having RTI as a response to intervention as a mode of eligibility for the specific learning disability program would decrease their assessment and children receiving proper assessments looking at their academic and or behavioral concerns. Another event was the Model Licensure Act. I don't know if you are aware that Texas is no longer called School Psychologists. The American Psychological Association had an initiative to remove, as one of the byproducts, the title School Psychologist from our profession. Texas lost, and they're no longer called school psychologists. They tried it in California, and we monitored that closely, and it all went all the way to the state Supreme Court, where NASP, the National Association of School Psychologists, stepped in and kept that from happening to California. But luckily for Florida, we had very close associations with the Florida Psychological Association, and they were not willing to follow the National Association in terms of challenging the use of the term school psychologist with school psychologists.
What were they trying to call us? So, for example, what did Texas end up being called, school psychologists in Texas?
I think they're called evaluation technician, something like that.
Ooh.
I don't know exactly what the title is, but yeah, it would not be school psychologist.
So you were at the forefront of fighting that title change in Florida?
Correct, in terms of marshaling, helping to marshal our friends at the Florida Psychological Association to say, no, we are not going to pursue that here in Florida with the school psychologists.
Well, maintaining good relationships helps on all levels, it sounds like.
Yes, yes. And the last big event was the election. As a past president, I'm responsible for conducting the election for our future officers and especially president. And it was challenged by another faction that wanted a different president, and the rationale they used was that a large portion of school psychologists used their school email, which they did not look at during the summer. Therefore, they were not aware of the election and were involved in it. So
I remember that. Did we have to have 2 elections
we
that
had a
year?
second election.
Okay.
So
And did the second election turn out the same as the first
No.
election?
no, it did not.
Oh, it was totally different.
Yes. So that was one of the things that caused, continued and exacerbated the divisiveness among the school board members, and we lost a lot of valuable school psychologists on our board as well as supporting our organization.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Were you able to do anything to rectify that situation during your presidency, or is that something that others that followed you?
Others that followed, and I
had
think
to-
there have been those who commented on that in terms of making amends, trying to make amends, and mend bridges.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that does sound like you ran into quite a few challenges during your term. Were there any political, environmental, or personal influences on your presidency that you'd feel comfortable sharing?
A lot of the influences were a lot of the past presidents who had some assistance in writing some of my papers and helping provide direction and input on a lot of these issues and how to resolve a lot of problems both on our state level and nationally. One of the things that goes on during your first job as president is you sit down with the past presidents and they give you advice, and it was a little intimidating to be in the same room, and at one point they started arguing about RTI, and I said, can we move forward and get back to what I need from you all in terms of how to be a president? And big smiles on their face, and someone said, yes, Brad, absolutely right. So yeah, that was an interesting event. My very first duty as president was to call the hotel police security on one of our own constituents who was taking things from under the vendors' tables. And she was escorted out and told she was not allowed to come back. But that was my first, and what do we do about this? And I said, well, this is a hotel security matter. And past presidents said, yes, that's correct. That was the first official duty I had. So these kind of things pop up during your presidency, but
I haven't heard of that happening to anyone else. It just maybe during your presidency,
correct.
and that was
it. Was
it.
a one-time thing and it happened during my presidency.
Wow.
Yes.
What would you say that being president of FASP meant to you personally?
Oh, it was an enormous growth opportunity. I really developed an understanding of the job responsibilities of school psychologists, as well as having to be a leader on a board, herding cats and getting things done that were our normal duties, such as holding conferences and addressing issues on the outside. That was a big challenge, as well as public speaking. I did not do well with public speaking in high school and college, and I enhanced those skills greatly as a president. So.
Well, you certainly seem like a natural now, Brad.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you'd like to impart with us as a former FASP president?
Yes, one of the things I cannot emphasize strongly enough is our constituents, our other school psychologists in the state becoming members and paying the dues. It really does help us combat some of the challenges to our organization, as well as promote our organization and move it forward and go in directions that maybe we don't want to go, but need to go. So I strongly encourage everyone to scrape together the money and support our organization with dues.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brad Underhill.